For those people who have HMOs, there's actually some specific guidance around HMOs as well. So for buy-to-let style properties, there's not really anything that we need to worry about as landlords, because we'll have a single family unit in those properties and self-isolation rules. One person is sick, the whole family self-isolates for 14 days. That's fairly easy to deal with. In HMOs, there actually is some specific guidance, because while it's not a family unit, you do have a number of people who are all together, and the possibility for cross-infection, cross-contamination is very high. So the guidance at this stage, which your lettings agent should be sending out to your tenants, or you as a landlord should be sending out to your tenants if you self-manage, is that if one person in the HMO displays symptoms of coronavirus, the whole occupants of that HMO need to self-isolate for the next 14 days. They need to treat it a little bit as if they were a family unit. We need to be responsible around this overall. Now, potentially, if there is a case of coronavirus in one of your HMOs, there may be a requirement for some deep cleaning, some medical grade cleaning to happen later on. What the government has said is that is at the cost of the landlord. That's not a cost to be borne by the tenant, so just bear that in mind. If there does need to be any type of deep clean to disinfect the property after a coronavirus outbreak in one of your HMOs, that's a potential cost for you as a landlord to bear that will need to be done at some point. Optional measures, it depends a little bit on who you've got in your HMOs, whether this is appropriate or not. I would say the guidance on this is, are you housing any particularly high-risk tenancy groups? So people with known health conditions that would make them more susceptible to the coronavirus, or potentially the devastating effects of coronavirus, potentially putting them into a situation where they might wind up in hospital, or are you housing people who are in that older age group which are at higher risk as well? And if that is the case, they're saying potentially, as a property owner, putting soap in the property, putting hand sanitizer in the property to encourage good practice as well. It's not a requirement, it's an advisory at this stage for people who are housing maybe at-risk tenants in HMO style properties. There's also a couple of guides that have been published online by the government for dealing with situations where you do have a number of people who need to be in close proximity together, but it's not a clinical setting like a hospital as well, and some of the things that can be done in terms of stopping the spread of infection. So it may be worth speaking to your lettings agents, or if you're self-managing, arranging for this information. They're printed posters prepared by the government that you can put up in your HMOs to make sure that you're keeping tenants informed as much as possible about how to keep themselves safe during this difficult time. Now, there's a link there on the screen. There's a really good guide from the NLA RLA. They merged recently on some of the guidance for landlords at these times, and you've got links to some of the information from the government that you can provide to tenants as well. So if you are a member, definitely worth downloading or reading through some of the guidance from the NLA RLA there to make sure that you are operating in the best way during this difficult time. Staying on the theme of government measures, coronavirus business interruption measures. Now, the government has announced a number of measures are coming, and a lot of detail on this is due next week, in week commencing the 23rd of March. The measures they've announced is there will be grants for certain types of businesses, 10,000 or up to 50,000. Now, this is focused predominantly on tourism, on hospitality industry, and a lot of those industries which will have to effectively close down for the good of us all. There's also some grants available for those businesses who are already getting business rate relief as well. We're waiting for the detail next week on exactly how you qualify to get this and how you claim those grants, how they will be paid as well. But it's worth bearing in mind that those things are coming. There's also business interruption loans as well. Now, these are not grants. This is not free money that's coming from the government. This is actually money that's going to be made available by the mainstream lenders, but underwritten by the government. The government underwriting up to 80% of that loan overall. They've also announced the plan is for the government to meet the first 6 months worth of interest payments on these loans. But it's worth bearing in mind these are long-term loans, so there will be a cost to the business. This is about giving businesses the room to borrow with some guarantees from the government, government to be able to cash flow themselves through this period of time. But it is borrowing, there is a cost attached to it, so you do need to consider whether it's appropriate for your business as well. And it's worth all of us who are property investors, we may have property related service businesses as well. We want to be looking at the information that's published regards this that's coming out next week, but do consider whether it's appropriate to your business overall, because it is taking on more debt. Now, we can imagine they will loosen up some criteria and make it easier and quicker to qualify for some of these loans, because what the government doesn't want in this situation is a lot of failed businesses over this period and really compounding an already difficult situation because of coronavirus with also a big economic problem. But do think about using this responsibly. The same way when we're looking at a property deal, we do things like stress testing. We look at making sure that we're taking a sensible loan to value, that we've built in that margin to be able to afford to pay for it. A business interruption loan may very well be something that your business needs right now in order to continue to trade, but make sure that it is affordable for the long term. And once we see some detail on how these are going to be put forward, how they're going to be implemented, we will update on that in the coming weeks as well.